Always a pleasure having Dr. Anjhula Bais with us, international psychologist from the Mind Faculty. Good morning, Doc.
Good morning, Steve. Good morning, Shaz.
Good morning.
Now, Jolo has a brand new website which he proclaims his innocence on.
If you haven't seen it, is joe-low.com. And the financier wrote that for the past several years, he'd been subjected to a series of allegations around the globe in relation to the operations of 1MDB. He said, I've been paraded in effigy through the streets of Kuala Lumpur, photographs from my younger days plastered in tabloids across the globe. And it's become clear that there is no platform where objective information can be presented regarding this issue, and no jurisdiction that hasn't been poisoned by gossip, innuendo, and unproven allegations. And this website is an effort to change that, he says.
Well, I don't know what he expected, lah.
Yeah, because it wouldn't be easier to just come back to KL and face the music.
Which got us thinking, Doc, why do we hide behind the net,
Well, I'm going to clarify, obviously, that I haven't met Jolo. He hasn't been in therapy, or I haven't seen him in sessions. But just generally speaking, one of the reasons we hide behind the internet and, sort of with usernames and, behind a mouse and clicking away and sometimes trolling is because the internet offers a anonymity to be someone else that seems more palatable. So it gives you free range, and you don't have to regulate as much. So all these impulses, whether it's rage or things that you usually wouldn't give yourself permission to do in real life, as the internet stands right now, there's a complete gateway of freedom. But going into the future, I think there's a lot of strong arguments with, social media companies and otherwise that you will be identified, and there will be a sort of digital fingerprint that where people can't hide behind the mask, because the internet actually becomes a very uncivilized place.
But in the case of this individual, he hasn't put up an avatar. He doesn't have a weird, handle like cute boy 97. So he's more or less representing himself. What do you think he hopes to achieve by placing himself on this kind of platform?
Well, I think, ignorance is not bliss. Ignorance at times, or denial, can be brutal, and it takes on many, many facets and faces. There's a lot of psychological dynamics of denial. So, and it can exert a very, very strong influence in the sense that we wish as a society we were just basing things more on facts, but that's not the case. The emotional impulses take over, whether it's, let's say, pride in, for example, spending ability, momentum, inertia, stubbornness, impulsiveness. So all these factors could be going into why he's decided to create a website and how he interprets the facts. There is no sort of, this is black and white, this is the truth. Different people interpret it in different ways.
On that note, we want to find out next, when we return with Dr. Anjhula Bais, international psychologist, if there is a deeper issue when people actually use social media to mask or dress what they want to portray. That's after Mark Anthony on Lite. On Mind Matters this morning, Dr. Anjhula Bais is with us. She's a international psychologist with the Mind Faculty, and we're looking at Low-Tech Joe Low's new website claiming his innocence.
Okay, he's not the only one who uses the internet or social media. We all do. In fact, I don't know any person who doesn't really do the whole social media thing.
No, my husband, he's not on Facebook.
Oh, he's not? Okay, well, great for him. But
he's on Instagram, Twitter, Snapchat, just not Facebook.
No, actually, none of it, which explains his superb mental health.
Wonderful. I guess there is something there, isn't there? Is there a deeper issue, Dr. Anjhula, when people use social media to mask or dress up what it is they want to portray to the world?
Yeah, so one of, in the field of psychology, there's a very famous psychologist, Philip Zimbardo. I've had the privilege to listen to him speak and interact in the U.S. And, he did a very classic experiment that is well known to people in and out of the field called the Stanford Prison Experiment. He came across this phenomenon called the Lucifer effect. So what happens when you are afforded anonymity or a shield, so to speak? And in his experiment, actually people were in person. You either play the role of a prisoner or you play the role of a police guard or a jail guard. Mm-hmm. And you got to wear a police uniform or a jail guard uniform, and sunglasses. And because the people could hide behind the sunglasses, normally nice, socially conscious people turned into control freaks and sadists. And they would actually administer shocks and increasing electrical voltage to the prisoners. And it was just an abuse of power. So a lot of times, on the internet, unless you are admitting what your identity is and who you are, you're not hiding behind anonymity, you don't have an opportunity to regulate and own what you're putting out there. So it's kind of a free-fall.
Well, what about those who put out 10,000 selfies a day? What's the underlying issue there, Dr. Anjhula?
Well, there could be many. It's contextual, and obviously the individual involved, it'll look different for different people. Having said that, there could be a high rate of narcissism, a high rate or high need rather for validation, sort of externally deriving one's worth and acceptance through the amount of likes. It's a way of otherwise, feeling invincible in life, so wanting to be seen. A lot of times likes on social media or retweets or things like that have been likened to addictive behaviors. Sort of the reward system lights up just the way you would if you have a drug hit or a caffeine high. So each time you get a like, it's like a ping reward system, and then it sort of formulates an addiction down the line.
Wow, I've never looked at likes like a shot of caffeine, but
yeah, if you think about it, it kind of makes sense because you just keep scrolling, and there's
revisiting that to see how many more likes you have.
Refreshing the page, a compare and despair, and in private practice, it is so common to hear people be on social media till 2-3 in the morning. So high rates of addiction, and you can just imagine. You can have a lay experiment. Just imagine what would happen if you said you took someone's mobile phone away for a day. Most people wouldn't, feel relieved. They'd feel horror.
It'd be hard to face the music.
Exactly.
It's something that we want to discuss when we come back next with Dr. Anjhula on Lite. Dr. Anjhula Bais with us this morning, international psychologist with the Mind Faculty on Mind Matters, looking at Lotek Joe, who instead of coming back to Malaysia and facing the music, he decided to come out with a website and claim his innocence on that platform.
Right. Now he's high-tech Joe, not low-tech Joe. Well, Joe Low anyway. So, Dr. Anjhula, why do we find it... Coming back to Joe Low, why do, some people find it hard to face the music?
Well, I suppose especially in cases where there's a lot of desire or greed, there will be corresponding emotions of shame and denial as well. When you come face to face, it's much easier, for example, to be in movement. Putting aside Joe Low for a second, how many of us, pretend that it's okay when, in fact, let's say we haven't had a meaningful conversation with our spouse in over a year? How many of us realize, maybe in the back of our head that, financially we really can't afford that dinner at an expensive restaurant that our friends invited us to, but the denial kicks in and, we want to be seen as that person about town, and reality is painful. Money can only provide a buffer for so long. So in some sense, it's easier to constantly be in movement than to face a very painful reality, because sometimes reality feels very constricted. So, let's say in relation to money, maybe there's that existential question of, who am I? Would people want to date me or marry me or be friends with me or like me if I didn't have money? That's a very painful question. So it's not just as easy as, you have money, no problems. We all have our Achilles heels where we're in denial about something. But when we can come out of that denial, it's very powerful, because then we can all build the future that we deserve.
Dr. Anjhula Bais is with us this morning on Mind Matters. Next, as we continue discussing Joe Low releasing a brand new website claiming his innocence. One more thing that a lot of us Malaysians are waiting is for him to actually be honest with all of us.
Yes, and face the music.
Absolutely. We'll discuss this in 10. FR David's first on Lite. Dr. Anjhula Bais is with us this morning. She's an international psychologist with the Mind Faculty, and this is Mind Matters. We are focusing on Lotek Joe, or Joe Low's new website where he proclaims his innocence. But I think a lot of us Malaysians are just waiting for him to just, come back and be honest with everyone.
Mm-hmm. So with regards to that, Dr. Anjhula, how do we deal with pulling off the Band-Aid and being honest with ourselves and with others?
Well, very often we skew in one direction, which is negativity. And, we know in psychology what we focused on expands. So I'm not asking, when facing reality, I'm not asking one to deny the negative, but it's also very important to accept the positives, and different people focus on different things. But I think in terms of sort of taking the bandage off and facing reality, acceptance is very important. Acceptance is a ability to unconditionally value all parts of who you are. Most people find that very hard to do, to self-accept themselves, because we tend to be very critical of ourselves. But accepting ourselves in our life is a very important thing, and it all begins with the state of your mind. And then what else I would suggest is practicing radical honesty. So when you can admit your own pretense, then you can sort of powerfully begin to create a new future. And when you deny your current reality and everything that's in that, especially if it's a bad one, that's not going to make it go away. Looking things square in the eye, as scary as it may be, going through the bad stuff is a way to get to the good stuff, and it just takes practice.
I like that, radical honesty.
Well, it's been a pleasure having you in the studio with us this morning. Thank you so much for joining us, Dr. Anjhula.
Always a joy.
Missed out on all that great advice? You can always listen to our podcast at Lite.my.